Molly, welcome to Media and Me. First of all, how are you today?
I'm great, thank you, and thank you for inviting me. It feels so great to be back in Manchester. It's been a while.
Oh, when was the last time you were here?
It's when I was filming my podcast and recording everything. So it's like Manchester for me has such a nostalgic feel. Even though it was only a year ago, I come back and I'm like so in the bubble again.
I bet it feels really special as well, because that's kind of like where your journey started, really, isn't it?
For sure. Yeah, no, it's a really encapsulated little city of mine. So yeah, it's so nice to be back, but I seem to have brought the rain along with me.
Yeah, I know. I remember last time when we filmed the last episode, I was like, so nice to have such a rare sunny day, and now it's raining.
Spoke too soon.
I know. So before we dive into all the kind of amazing things you've done so far and the barriers you've smashed through as well, give the audience a little intro into you and what you've been doing.
Oh my gosh, the pressure. Hi, I'm Molly Smith. I'm a journalist, kind of aspiring journalist, maybe doing a bit of work, and also presenter. And my most notable work, I guess, is I'm the host of The Way Up, which is a podcast on BBC Sounds and 5 Live.
So before this chat, you mentioned to me that you had an interest in the news and TV from a very early age, but you didn't really understand what journalism was as a career path. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, because when I was 10, I was like, how can I get on Strictly Come Dancing?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And I was like, I'm not going to be a singer, I'm not going to be an actress, but there's these things called journalists on Strictly, and I was like, I'm going to do that. And at the time, I thought a journalist was just someone who reads the news. I had no idea of, obviously, whatever it entails. But what was it that kind of piqued your curiosity into this industry in the beginning?
Such a great question. I think dialing it back down to when I first knew what journalism was, I always thought it was written journalism. I never even put two and two together that journalism could be either on TV or even reading the news. I thought that was just a presenter. And so I think really the first thing that inspired that was when I found out that's what journalism was, and that it was something that could be so much more fulfilling than just pen and paper. I think that's kind of what it was, but it's through looking at people in the media that have really inspired me, and loving their careers and thinking you've really made a difference, and it's that difference that a journalist can make that has inspired me to take on that career.
Who are those kind of people for you?
Oh my gosh, I mean, so stereotypical. Stacey Dooley, of course, what a queen.
We will dive in. Molly has had the most incredible experience with Stacey Dooley, one I am super jealous of. Anyone else?
I think just a lot of daytime presenters on TV I always really looked up to. I thought they were just really personable, and when you can see that person behind the work as well, I really enjoyed that. Documentary presenters I think Cherry Healey was a big one that I used to watch when I was younger. And yeah, just various people in the media that have contributed small amounts but on very important stories. And I think it's those stories that are really encapsulated me and that have changed my perspective on the world and society, which essentially is what journalism does and inspires me as the career.
And you're actually one of those people who has a really personal story that brought a lot to journalism. I actually think we're very similar in a couple of ways. We had a kind of conversation before this, and we've had a couple of messages back and forth. And I said to you before, when I read what you'd sent me, I was like, it's kind of like reading a bio of myself. And you mentioned that before you went to uni, you didn't feel like journalism or a career in the media was something that felt secure to you. And I can totally relate to that, which is why when I first decided to go to uni, I went to King's College to study philosophy, because I thought, right, I could maybe do journalism, but I could maybe do teaching or something else that feels a lot more safe. And I'm one of those people who needs stability and knows where their money's going to come in and out, and et cetera, et cetera. So what was it that kind of changed your mind and thought, do you know what, maybe I can take this risk? And it's really hard to let go of those inhibitions. What was it that made you think, do you know what, I'm just going to give this a crack?
I think it sounds so I don't know, maybe very privileged, but I got a lot of luck, and I think I never expected to have had that. And because I never put pressure on myself maybe to get the opportunities that I've been so lucky to get, that was kind of what allowed it to be real. because I never would have gone into it if like I was taking it seriously, which sounds really silly because it does, like saying that it's like, oh, I've gone into journalism by an accident, but in essence I kind of have done, because I never would have taken the step if not, because it always just seemed a bit too scary, because it is unstable and it is like, it's just a bit scary.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. Alongside luck, because it definitely isn't just luck that has got you to where you are. I mentioned in the previous episode that, like, when I was working, I worked on a couple of Stacey Dooley's documentaries last year, and when I was there in that kind of environment, I thought, I've completely fluked this. This is just luck. But it's not just luck. So what was it that you kind of thought, what were your attributes that you think made for a great podcast at the BBC?
I think it was sort of the passion behind it. I think you can really tell from a listener perspective when somebody really cares about the issue that they're talking about. And as you said, like, it was, the podcast that I created was very personal to a story that I related to and that I'd been through, and then being able to relate that to all the guests that I was interviewing and then the audience as well. I think the audience really sort of picks up on that. And so, yeah, it was sort of about creating that, like, the passion behind it. And that's not something that you can study for 10 hours for an exam, or read a load of books about, or sort of do a lot of education about. That's something that kind of comes quite naturally and maybe through experience. And that maybe is sort of, I don't know, what made the podcast and what I've done in the media reach people and touch people.
You also mentioned to me before this that you're a huge perfectionist, which again, something I relate to. I think my family and friends tear their hair out with me all the time because they just want me to take a little bit of a chill pill. Going into uni then, because you went to the University of York, yeah? How hard was it to kind of let go of that side of yourself? Because it's really difficult to be a perfectionist at uni.
Yeah, no, for sure.
It's almost impossible.
Yeah, I think, like, as you said, like, I've been a perfectionist my entire life, and it's sort of why I went to University of York to study education. I was going to be a teacher because that was sort of a career path that I could kind of foresee and predict for myself. You get your degree, then you get your PGCE, and then most likely you are going to get a job, and you could kind of map out that career for you with sort of a minimal risk. And I was a perfectionist all throughout my GCSEs and then my A-levels. And my A-levels went slightly wrong. I didn't quite get the grades I wanted, and I didn't get into the university I wanted. And so University of York was my insurance choice, and I was devastated about that. Like,
really?
Absolutely devastated.
Because University of York is still a brilliant uni. What was your first choice?
Durham. Durham University.
It's a lot of pressure to put on yourself.
Which, looking back on it now, and hindsight's a great thing, right? Like, I'm so glad that was the university. I didn't go there, and I went to University of York, but you don't really see that in the moment. And so I kind of said to myself, like, I was saying to everyone, like, on results day, I'm not going to university. I'm taking a gap year. I'm redoing all my A-levels because I didn't get good enough, and I'm going to redo it all so they're perfect and I get into the university that I want. And my parents and my school was like, just give it a go. And I was like, okay, like, I'll give it a go, but like, I'll drop out before Christmas, right? Like, it's fine. Like, I'm just doing it because everyone wanted me to do it, and I've not really got much to lose because I'm going to drop out and then everything's going to be fine and it'll work out. And because I had given myself that, like, safety blanket, I guess, of it doesn't have to work out, I let go of that perfectionism when I started university, because it didn't matter, because I was like, well, my first, like, these assessments, they're not going to matter because I'm not going to be here in like a few weeks, right? Like, it doesn't matter. And as soon as I started university, I think that's when I started to find myself and find what I wanted to become, and sort of a lot of the passions and actually a lot of the journalism work experience that I had came within my first term of university. And so I kind of associated actually being at university with this amazing new life that I'd found, and suddenly, like, the academic side didn't really matter as much anymore.
Yeah, I guess it felt very exciting as well.
Yeah.
Like, all of a sudden, this thing that you were kind of dreading and thought, I'm going to give it till Christmas and that's it.
Yeah.
Became like your new passion and your new love.
Yeah, for sure. And, like, again, like, it's going to become a bit of a repeating theme. Like, as soon as I don't put pressure on myself, I seem to do so much better.
Yeah, but I think that's, like, so true for life as well. If you just let go of your own ambitions a little bit and just think, what is the worst that can happen? Like, nobody's dying.
Yeah.
Like, my boyfriend always says to me, are you okay in this very moment? And if you are, everything's fine.
So true. Yeah, so true.
At uni, what kinds of things did you do to kind of like start your journalism career? Because me and Manzi talked about this on the last episode, how important student media really is.
Yeah.
I at my first year at King's College, I did more student media than I did my actual degree, which is why I ended up dropping out and going to News Associates, because I was like, I'm not actually doing any work towards my degree here. I'm just writing for the student paper. Did you kind of get involved in student media, and how do you think that's benefited you with your other work experience that you've done in like big publications?
So I didn't straight away at all. As I said, I went to uni and thought I wasn't going to be there for very long, and so I didn't really sign up to any societies at all, and I didn't even know there was a student media. That's how sort of clueless I was to university life. And so that actually came a little bit afterwards, and I'd sort of had a bit of experience, and the experience ended, and I really wanted to continue it because I loved it. And then I was like, oh great, like my uni's got a radio, that's convenient, I'll just go there. And that just started a whole new chapter of my university experience. So that was in my second year. I joined University Radio York, which is amazing, such an incredibly passionate group of people that dedicate so much of their time to that studio. So I presented a show called News Hour, so sort of very typical like headline bulletins and writing news and chatting about various entertainment news, stuff like that, with a brilliant team of students. And so I did that. I did a bit of sort of outside broadcast presenting, presented a carol concert for Christmas in the York Minster, which was like amazing. And then I also joined my student newspaper, York Vision, and sort of helped out a lot behind the scenes there, and got involved, and just like met people with similar interests to mine, because I'd never had a friend that was interested in the news or interested in TV or behind the scenes or just anything like that. It was just all very kind of new to me, and I was like, great, like finally like people kind of have the same passions as me, and I'm not just that kind of weird kid that watches This Morning after school because I've got nothing else better to do.
Yeah, no, I totally relate. I don't think you really meet your like real friends with like real interests until you go to uni. Like I've got one of my best friends who I didn't meet at uni, but that's the only friend I've got before I went to uni. All my other friends are as a result of going to university. And something really special, and just something I'm totally jealous of, happened to you in your first year of uni, just before you were going home for Christmas. Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, the day I went home.
So just to put this into context, Stacey Dooley came to your uni accommodation and you filmed an episode of her podcast with her. I am a diehard Stacey Dooley fan. I mean, when I wrote the email to the chief director of Firecracker, who makes her documentaries, I was just like known when I came into the office as the Stacey Dooley superfan. They were like, oh my God, here she is. Like, they didn't think I don't think at the time they thought, oh, this girl can actually bring some cool ideas to the table. They just thought, we'll just let her in because clearly she's obsessed with Stacey Dooley. And I never actually got to meet her, which is really quite sad. And I would love to. But tell me about that day. How did you kind of manage your nerves? What was the interview like? Was there a big team with her, or was it just like minimal people?
I mean, it was very minimal, very kind of low key, which I loved. And it came about literally within my sort of first week of starting uni. I saw, as I mentioned before, diehard Stacey Dooley fan. Like my whole lockdown experience was watching documentaries.
We're literally so similar.
And so obviously followed her on Instagram, was doing the scrolling, and I sort of saw this post that she was looking for contributors for her podcast Fresh Starts, which is on BBC Sounds. And the sort of premise of the episode is interviewing a guest, and they're all sort of from very normal walks of life, and they were embarking on a new start. And as somebody that started uni a week ago, I was like, oh, that's typical. I've got a new start, you know? And so I emailed the producer, I think it was, or some sort of email with basically my story that I started university, but actually the thought of starting university was something that seemed very, very impossible a few years ago. due to struggling with anorexia when I was younger. And so I sort of sent off that email with a bit of my story, a bit of background, and they got back to me quite quickly, was interested in my story, had a lot of chats with such a lovely producer, Blanca, who has just been absolutely amazing throughout this whole journey. And had a few phone calls with her, a lot of sort of duty of care stuff straight away, which was amazing, great to hear. And yeah, it was sort of all confirmed that Stacey was going to come up to York and come into my student accommodation, into my uni room, which is mad. What a story to tell around your kitchen table at uni for people that you've known for like a few weeks. I'm like, do you know who Stacey Dooley is? They're like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, she's coming here in a few weeks.
What were your friends' reaction to that?
They were just like, who are you? Like,
we have got the coolest girl in our flat.
It was such a strange, like, I think they were just kind of like deer in headlights, like, what's going on? So was I. And I was so excited, so nervous, I think, as well, because it was the first time that I'd ever spoken publicly, especially on the level that it was, but even in front of like friends, family, that kind of thing, about my struggles with anorexia. And you sort of go, we went quite a lot into detail on that with the podcast. And so, yeah, she came and it was just like the most special experience, so calming. So it was just her and one producer who was lovely, sort of met us all. We had a really nice sit down, sort of talk through the process, and I had an amazing time filming it. And yeah, just the duty of care was like really there. And I was the contributor, obviously, in that scenario. And how I felt and how safe I felt there was something that I emulate now in all the work I do.
I was going to say, what did you kind of learn from her being an interviewee on the other end? What did you learn as going into being an interviewer from her kind of style?
I think the fact she was so human. It wasn't like talking to a robot that kind of had like a list of questions or sort of didn't speak to you at all and was very like on herself, but spoke to you as soon as the cameras rolled on, you know, and sort of created this persona. She was herself from the moment she got out of the car, you know, and there were no cameras, no microphones. And I think that was so lovely to sort of see, even from like a bit of a fangirl perspective. Like, it's sort of that thing of like, don't meet your heroes. But it just was, so personable and so, she made something that was so scary not scary, which is like such a skill. And yeah.
So in that episode, you kind of dived into your struggles with anorexia because you got diagnosed when you were 14.
Yeah.
If you feel comfortable sharing, I remember in that episode, I watched it a couple of days ago, you said that anorexia kind of stole a lot of your personality. So going to university, how did you kind of manage to build that back up into like the incredible girl you are today? Like, just walking in here, your energy is just amazing.
Oh, thank you.
How was it kind of rebuilding that? And obviously going into this kind of a career, everyone's very like, hi, like, how are you? Like, very like energetic and bubbly. Do you feel so proud of yourself for like the woman you are today?
I think so, yeah. Definitely sort of looking back at how I was like 6-7 years ago, it's like a completely different person, which is so lovely to be able to accept and know now as well. And yeah, I think in terms of like how I changed at uni is the best experience for it, right? Because nobody knows who you are, nobody knows your past. I mean, they all found out on a podcast, but it's fine. Like,
yeah, but it was on BBC Sounds. That's super cool.
They got to meet Stacey Dooley, right? They can't judge me. But yeah, like, it is, you kind of are able to create this persona that you really want for yourself, and you don't, because I think, especially when you're at school and people kind of know you as the anorexic girl, it's not always the nicest label to have. I've done a lot of work to get to university, even though I don't think I'd stay there, but sort of allowing myself to be me without that label was just so freeing. And yeah, I don't really know, I don't think there's sort of a way that it happened. It kind of happened naturally, but I think that's probably the best way for it to happen.
And a lot of kind of what the amazing things you've done in your like career so far have come from that really dark time in your life. So I guess not that every cloud has a silver lining, but I think it's nice to know that so much positivity came from that, such a horrendous experience. Because a few months afterwards, in 2022, you applied for the Rachel Bland Podcast Award. And for those who don't know, just to put it into context, Rachel Bland is an amazing British broadcaster who really tragically died of breast cancer. So what was that kind of process like? Because I feel like any kind of process with the BBC is very long-winded. There's a lot of stages, there's a lot of interviews. How was that process? And what did you do when you found out that because the prize was a podcast, your own podcast with BBC Sounds.
Yeah.
What was it like developing the idea to pitch to the BBC? And what was the process like once they thought, oh, this sounds like a bit of us?
Yeah, so it's sort of, as you sort of mentioned, I had sort of that first contributor experience on the Stacey Dooley podcast in December. Then I think the award sort of went out around February time, I want to say. Don't quote me on that. But that's sort of the time frame. It wasn't long. And I'd sort of come off that podcast and had such an amazing reception from like members of the public that had listened to it, and felt really proud of myself and felt like maybe this was a voice that I could share and that it was like helping people. And that's sort of all I've wanted to be able to do, is sort of be able to use a platform and a voice to be able to help people and make people feel understood and help people understand. And so I think like it kind of gave me a bit of confidence that I hadn't really had before. And again, sort of saying like how amazing the producers were, they had sort of given me that confidence too. And I think one of them sort of said like, you'd be great at this as a career. And I was like,
and they kind of made it feel like a safe space.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's so important.
And so a few months after that, hadn't really thought much else about it, was doing my degree in education, starting to love uni. And then I saw again on social media that,
power of social media.
I know, it's crazy, that the BBC 5 Live were advertising for the Rachel Bland New Podcast Award. And it was a kind of similar premise, that my story kind of fitted. It was sort of, there were 2 winners beforehand, and then obviously the amazing work that Rachel Bland did on her podcast, You, Me and the Big C. And it's sort of all about having stories that aren't necessarily spoken about because they're a bit taboo, a bit uncomfortable. And it's sort of about making the uncomfortable comfortable and creating a conversation about things that people tend to shy away from. And so again, I saw that application, and it was a short application form. I just filled it in and genuinely thought nothing about it afterwards, completely forgot about it.
If anyone's watching this and applying for something really big or something you think, oh, it'd be great to get this, but I feel like they're never going to see my application, just send it and forget about it, because the worst that can happen is you've forgotten about it and it never happened.
Exactly.
Or you get it like you did.
Yeah, like you have to put everything to the backside, sort of, like, sounds a bit morbid, but like expect the worst, like, and I do. And so I applied, didn't think anything of it. And to be honest, I didn't think anything of it because I was 18 at the time. You had to be 18 to apply. No one's going to look at an 18-year-old application and be like, yeah, they're capable of like hosting a podcast or creating a few ideas. And so I completely forgot about it until I was away on holiday in Venice, and I got an email sort of saying I was through to the next round. Amazing. And I had to film a 2-minute audio clip or something, so they could sort of hear my voice, I guess, and you had to explain the idea of the podcast. And it was a podcast about opening up the conversation about eating disorders, speaking to a variety of different people with a variety of different experiences. And so got home from Venice, found out I had COVID, great. And the application was due in like a couple of days later. So I was like, oh God, well, I can't even speak right now. Like my throat is like croaky. I feel awful. I'm not even going to do this application because there's no point, because I'm not going to get it anyway. And something in me was like, oh, you might as well give it a go. Like, what's the worst that can happen? So I sent off this croaky audio that didn't really sound like me.
Sometimes that's great for radio though.
Yeah.
People love a bit of a husky voice.
Yeah, it's great. So I sent it off, and again, like, didn't think anything of it. And that time it wasn't because I was 18, it was because I had COVID and I sounded like, well, I don't even know, I had a frog down my throat. And so again, forgot completely about it, and honestly just felt so proud of myself that I'd got to a next stage in something so big. And I was like, oh, someone's actually like taken the time to read through my application, like that's so cool. And yeah, I forgot about it until a couple months later. I think it was in June.
Things take so long, don't they?
It takes so long.
That's why it's the best to just apply and forget, because if you're waiting for months and months and months on their every word, it's never going to end well.
Yeah. But I got a message from, I think, like just an unknown number saying like, is it okay if we call you tomorrow about the Rachel Bland Podcast Award? And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool, but like expect the worst. I'm not going to get it. Like, you have to compose yourself when they tell you that like you haven't got it. And I picked up the phone and it was Rachel Bland's husband that answered the phone, Steve, and he let me know that he loved the idea and that he was so thrilled to announce me as the winner of the award. And
that was mind-blowing.
So, like, it's just so shocked. Like, I was completely taken for words, and I'm a talker. I can talk for days. And
you're in the right career.
Yeah. And I was just completely, like, taken aback. Had no clue how to process it. Like, it was and I sort of wasn't allowed to tell anyone either. And so I was at uni and I was like, guys, can we go out tonight? I'm really happy, but like, I can't really tell you why.
You've got to celebrate. I can't tell you what we've got to celebrate about.
And so I sort of, it was just such a high. And I remember exactly the moment where I was, and I took myself on a little walk afterwards, and I was just like, this is sort of going to be the start of something like quite serious. And like, am I the right person for this? Well, I must be. Like, it was sort of, a lot was going through my head, but just excitement really. And yeah, telling my parents to say that I'd won the award was like insane. Just such a special memory and such a brilliantly personable way of sort of handing it over. And
yeah, because they could have just got a BBC producer to ring you up and be like, look, you've got it, like, amazing, congratulations. But that was really like a personal experience. Yeah,
and I think what's so lovely about the award, and as I said, there's sort of been 3 winners of it now, is it is such a personal thing. The award is it's so personal, it's so emotional in why it was created. All of the producers and everyone that works behind the scenes knew Rachel so well. They were friends, and so it was so personable on every single level. And so there was just so much passion going into a project. And like, what an amazing experience to be able to work with people that share so much like love and passion for their career and the story that they're putting out. And again, like, what I believe journalism is, like an avenue to help people feel understood and to create awareness and create change and stuff. So,
and I guess as a person who's experienced quite a lot of self-doubt, and you said that you'd said, am I even the right person for this? That probably gave you a massive spur to be like, no, I am the, like, a lot of people have looked at this idea and thought it was great. Did it kind of boost your self-confidence massively?
I did.
Or did you feel like massive imposter syndrome, or a bit of both?
I think it is a bit of both. Like, you kind of turn up to the studio on your first day and you're like, oh my gosh, this is huge. But yeah, like I did feel a lot of self-confidence as well, which like I'm not afraid to sort of say. I think people can sort of feel a bit ashamed to be like, oh, I'm quite confident about this. But like, it did, I think, because so many people believed in me. And again, it's sort of, that's a product of the amazing people that I worked with, that they could give this opportunity to a very young girl that had no experience in like anything, and be able to make her feel like she could do something. Like, that's such an amazing thing.
Because that's so important to like note that like you have gone from a student at the University of York studying education to now a BBC presenter.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you say it like that, yeah.
You've been thrown massively in at the deep end. Did you get quite a lot of training in the process? Tell me about like the creative process of developing the podcast. Did you have the name before you?
No.
You didn't, so you came up with that with the BBC?
Yeah.
What was the involvement? Was it like 50-50, or was it them steering your idea? Like, what was that process like, and how long did it take to develop?
I think It was totally collaborative, to be honest. Like, I think we kind of, by a few months in, we completely thought as one. So it wasn't like it was me and then this person and this person.
What size team were you working with?
I think there was 4 of us, maybe. Yeah, so it was a very small team. And yeah, we sort of knew each other very well, and we bounce each other's ideas of each other. And what's brilliant about this industry is there are so many different skill sets that come into play, and so many different experiences, and people know what works and what doesn't. And I sort of had the experience of this podcast is about eating disorders, and I'd had experience with that. And so it was a completely collaborative process. But yeah, sort of in terms of the premise of the podcast, like that was sort of what I had sort of applied with. And then, yeah, it's just kind of all moulded really nicely together, and a lot of sort of group talks and yeah, just collaborative thinking really. And we're all sort of searching for the same end goal, right? So yeah, we knew it was all like in the best hands.
And like practically, what kind of training did they give you at the BBC? Because the BBC has a lot of very unique values to their company and their outlet. What training did they give you to become a presenter and an interviewer? Because I guess you'd had really minimal experience at that point.
Is it really weird to say none?
None at all. They didn't.
No, I kind of
So
just got sat in front of a microphone, and like they were so helpful, so lovely. So it was all pre-recorded, so there wasn't that pressure of it being live, and if I'd messed up on a certain word, like you could like re-record it. And it felt so, although you're in this huge studio in the BBC, it felt very at home. But yeah, in terms of like training, there really wasn't. It was sort of like, this is.
Because I can't imagine how nervous you must have been.
Yeah.
When you film that first episode, the first is always the worst, isn't it?
So much adrenaline, so much. I had quite a long time to prepare, which was nice. But again, there's sort of probably only much preparation you can do before you start driving yourself a bit crazy with like, I'm going to pronounce this word wrong and this word wrong, and suddenly every word sounds wrong. And sometimes maybe they knew what they were doing, right? Like, they were incredible, and probably throwing me into the deep end, I don't know, maybe worked.
I guess sometimes having a lot of time to prepare is like a double-edged sword, because you've got a lot of time to prepare and you can prepare your questions and blah, blah, blah. But like you said, it allows you more time to overthink. And I think sometimes when they say, right, we're recording with this guest next week, you're like, right, I don't have a choice at this point whether I can do this or not. I'm in a contract. I have to do it. And at the point where you have to do it, you have no choice.
Yeah.
So it's like, right, sink or swim kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you recorded with some huge guests. I remember you had Dr. Alex George on, who was on Love Island, for those who don't know. What was the kind of best person you interviewed? What was your best interview and the most like pinch me moment where you were like, wow, like I can't believe this is what I'm doing? And how did you kind of deal with those nerves before an interview?
So I've definitely got one that was sort of the sort of thing throughout my entire career so far that has just meant the absolute most to me, which was very conveniently placed like sort of right in the middle of so we did 10 episodes, and I think it was like episode 5 or 6, I can't remember exactly. But it wasn't anyone that was a big name or that was known or had any media experience, even sort of had social media. And I went into a eating disorder clinic and interviewed a lady who was sort of middle-aged and had been struggling with anorexia for like 20 odd years, I think it was. Such a powerful story, more so than sort of my own or anything. And sort of beforehand, like every episode was amazing, and interviewing big names is amazing and such a pinch me moment that like you're talking to a person you've watched on TV. It's incredible. But when it really comes down to it, it's talking to those people that maybe haven't had the opportunity to talk about it before.
I guess that's what the platform's for, is giving those people a voice.
Exactly.
Like you were saying, it's all about breaking down those stigmas, and the way you do that is by talking to the people who don't feel like they have a voice.
And it was such a powerful episode because I think certainly with eating disorders, people might not associate it with mothers or with people that have maybe a bit older. And it was just such an experience because of like, I think how much it meant to the guest as well. She sort of mentioned afterwards, like, I was really nervous beforehand, but you made me feel really comfortable, and I never thought I'd feel comfortable talking about something so personal. And
I guess you were like her Stacey Dooley in that situation.
Which is kind of thank you.
Roles in
it's
reverse.
Kind of crazy. And I think just her vulnerability and the fact that maybe she hadn't done much in the media before, and I really felt like this story is just, it made me very emotional, it made my producer very emotional, and it was just a very different episode. It sort of felt just so real, and like I sort of was telling a very, very real story with so much, I'm trying to think of the word, like, I don't know, just a lot of realness and a lot of sort of sharp edges. And I remember they sort of left the room afterwards and my producer sort of looked at me and she just went, "Molly, you've smashed that." And I was like, oh my gosh. Like, it was sort of the moment where it wasn't about me, it was about that guest. And that's like what I just want to emulate in my career, is that moment. Like, it's not about me, it's not about my story, it's not about what I've been able to contribute to a story. It's what I really want to do is help use sort of my skills to be able to help other people tell their story.
But in fact, your story is a huge asset because you would have never been in that room if it wasn't for your story. And I think this is really key to anyone watching this who kind of has a more personal story that they can bring to the table in journalism. Perhaps that woman who'd sat down with you and been so open wouldn't have been so open if she hadn't have known that you had a similar experience to her. So I think as a journalist, to have those kind of really human values in a job that's often vilified heavily.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I tell people I'm a journalist, they're like, never speak to me ever again. But when I'm like, no, but I'm not that kind of journalist. When you kind of have those human values and common ground with someone, it's so much easier to open up.
Yeah.
For them to open up to you as an interviewer, because you suddenly don't feel like a big scary interviewer who's come with loads of cameras and a producer. You're just a human who's gone through something very similar to what they have.
I think it's so important for anybody sort of watching this wanting to go into journalism. I think that personal element really brings out the best in guests, for sure. Like, it's so important to be able to be that person, to be able to be a person that can let other people be their person, you know? And you don't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be scary. And I do think maybe sort of the reasons why I have got some of the opportunities that I have done, it is because of that personal story that I have been able to bring to the table. And to be able to use that experience in a really positive way is like just so meaningful.
And actually, maybe it was a really wise decision by the BBC to not give you any training, because you were just going into that as you. And I think that's exactly what they probably wanted. Like, if they'd have gone in with all these different interview techniques and, right, this is how you, like, try and squeeze the most out of someone, like, we want tears and, like, all of that, that would have been so unauthentic. Like, that wouldn't have been you at all. So I think it's actually, like, upon reflection of my, like, last point, like, I think it's really nice that they just let you go into it as a human and as you, because essentially that's what made them think you were the best candidate for that award in the first place. So now you're a graduate, you mentioned that you had been applying for lots of different schemes. So you'd applied for the BBC, ITV, Channel 4,
basically every single one.
I think everybody does that, wanting to go into this industry. I've definitely, before I went to uni, I applied for like a couple of schemes, and the processes are just so long-winded. And again, it's just one of those where you have to apply and forget. And I guess you've kind of dealt, well, I don't know, but you might have dealt with like quite a bit of rejection. How have you kind of navigated that? Because that's really hard not to take personally. What's your kind of advice for anyone who's in our positions now? I'm just going into my third year of uni now. you've obviously just graduated.
Yeah.
For someone in a similar position to us, who's maybe just looking to get into the media and looking to go into those schemes, what would your advice be?
I think I've sort of got two pieces of advice that I'm telling myself every day, because I need to listen to my own advice too. And that is that time is not running out. If you don't get in this year, it's okay. Like, they're not going to want you because you're a year older the next year. Your life's not run out because you turned 21 and you've graduated. So that's the first thing, that life, it does go by quickly, but also you've got so many years to be able to have an amazing career. Don't beat yourself up over 1 year and one experience. And then the second thing, I think, as well, in not just applying for jobs, but also deciding on a career. We mentioned obviously earlier that journalism isn't the most stable career. You sort of do cope with a lot of rejection or freelance work, which maybe isn't as regular as people might like it to be. And that's, don't be so scared of failing that it stops you from trying. I think is such an important one, because that is what stopped me from trying earlier on, and why maybe I didn't choose to do a journalism degree or go into the industry. I want to say earlier on, I'm still really young. So I think, yeah, don't let the thought of failure stop you from trying. It's so important. And as we were saying, like, you send in the application, you forget about it, which is so much easier said than done, especially when so many of the grad schemes are like months and months and months of tough processes, like tough interviews, tough, like the amount of hours, like to put it into context, I've not got a graduate job. I didn't get accepted into any of them. And I spent my entire third year doing more work on applying for jobs than I did on my degree. 100%, like 100%. And it's a very time consuming process. It's a very mentally draining process, a very tough process. When you don't hear back and you get rejection, you don't get feedback, and you are just one of many. And I think it's so easy to really like doubt yourself on that. And something that I've definitely struggled with this year is sort of in my second year of uni, that's when the whole podcast thing was there, and I left second year on such a high, and this kind of maybe naive aspect of like, oh, this is going to be my career and I'm going to dive into it straight away and get an amazing job after uni and have this incredible graduate scheme and be really successful all before I'm like 22. And life just doesn't work like that. And I went into third year and I sort of took more of like this real career, like industry kind of side to like becoming a journalist, like getting the training, getting all of that sort of sorted. And that's where I've like found it really difficult, because I haven't managed to get any of those, and it is really hard. But I think you've got to remind yourself it's also really normal as well.
I think that's a really beautiful note to end on. Molly, thank you so much for being a guest on Media and Me. It's really been a privilege to sit down with you and have this conversation. If people want to follow your journey and see what you're up to, because you did mention to me that you've got a very good couple of things coming up that are super exciting, but she can't talk about them yet. So where can they follow your journey?
So I'm on Instagram at Molly Erin Smith, and then same on TikTok. And I've just started a new TikTok channel called Hot Take News, which is a bit of a Gen Z, like, yeah, topical news sort of journey. But yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me on. This has been such a lovely talk and such a lovely like reflection as well, because I don't often reflect back on some of the things that I've done, and you forget about some of the things and the memories that you've had. So thank you for being so lovely.
That's all good. Guys, thank you so much for watching this episode, and I really hope to see you in the next one.